Thank you very much. This picture is not a mistake, by the way, just if you were wondering to turn to the right event. So this is Mike Tyson. And what did he have to say? One of his most famous ever words? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's what he said when he was thinking about fear ahead of one of his fights. Now you could apply that to many different things. You could say the same about the Labour Party. Its former leader, Ed Miliband. The Remain campaign during the 2016 referendum. In fact, you can apply what Mike Tyson said to every single thing that's happened in British politics since 2016. Right, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, good. Because that means you're not a complete political junkie and nerd like me. Now, what we're here to talk about is ripple effects. And I'm here to tell you about how one punch in British politics has defined everything that's happened since 2016. Everyone thinks politics is often planned, grand ideas and speeches. The fact is, it's not. A lot of it is little events that happen and create a whole wave of things that no one can predict how exactly they are going to turn out. What I'm here to say is politics is so much more about chance and circumstance. So what I'm about to talk to you about is the greatest ripple effect in modern British politics. It started one dark winter evening, the opposite weather of today, in a bar in the House of Parliament. It's February the 22nd, 2012, and a gang of MPs were enjoying a pint in Stranger's Bar. Now, Stranger's Bar is deep in the bowels of the Palace of Westminster. It's on the river, it's dark, sweaty, smelly, a perfect place for political intrigue. The name of fact refers to the fact people like you and I can go there, because we are strangers to Westminster, we are not members of Parliament. Now, one of the MPs present is this fellow, who's called Eric Joyce. I'm sure none of you know any idea who he is, but he walks in for a drink at 10 PM one night and passes a delegation from the Canadian Parliament, having a very quiet, nice drink in the corner there. Now, Joyce has been in Parliament for decades at this point. He's Labour MP for Falkirk in Scotland. He was a junior ministerial aide during the new Labour government, but he also does have a bit of a drinking problem and has some other problems in his private life that will come to the fore later. Now this kicks off at about 10:30 at night. He's in the wood-panelled room, enjoying drinks, having quite a nice time like we might all are. And then suddenly, in the words of one MP, he completely flipped. He just burst out and said, "There's too many fucking Tories in here." And in that word, he went mad. He headbutted a Tory MP called Stuart Andrew. He enjoyed it so much he went and did it again. He headbutted him twice. It took 5 MPs, including the formidable Alex Shelby, who was a big fellow from Yorkshire, to restrain him. At 10 PM, the police came and arrested Eric Joyce. So I want you to savour this moment, which none of you might have heard of, but this is the moment that's going to define every single thing that's happened in British politics since then. So that was the first pebble cast within our ripple. Now, from those 10 minutes onwards, the next day, Eric Joyce was suspended from the Labour Party and charged with 3 counts of common assault. I think he flipped over a table as well as headbutting the Tory MP. The next month, he announced he was going to stand down from Parliament, but crucially, not in a by-election, at the next general election. So, the Labour Party duly began the process to select someone to replace him. It's an 8,000 majority, pretty safe seat, the sort of nice, comfortable place you could put someone into. So for the then Labour leader, Ed Miliband, this was a test of his leadership. Now, you probably don't recognise this guy. It was from the Cretaceous period before COVID, Brexit, and when things were vaguely normal in British politics. Now, he was the Labour leader from 2010 to 2015, and he got in as a big surprise after Gordon Brown lost that election. Everybody thought it was going to be his brother, David Miliband, who looks like Ed, except he's got a squiggle of grey in the middle of his hair. Now, what kind of person would Ed Miliband like to see put into Falkirk? A prime opportunity to put someone who could be helpful. Maybe someone from the centre-left of the party. Maybe, to use a dirty word, he could have chosen a Blairite. Or maybe he could have chosen someone from the trade union movement. Well, that's exactly what happened, but it was nothing to do with Ed Miliband himself. When the constituency Labour Party in Falkirk met, a sudden influx of members from the Unite Union raised some eyebrows. So what was going on? Unite is the biggest, or was then the biggest trade union within the country, very much from the left wing of things, and his leader Len McCluskey was very influential trying to get his people installed in these seats. So this lady here, Carrie Murphy, she was Len McCluskey's choice to be the candidate for Falkirk. And they were very close friends and later became romantic partners. And he really backed her candidacy, so much so, he got Unite to allegedly flood Falkirk with its own members to make sure she got selected. Now naturally, the Labour Party wasn't too happy about this. The scandal broke into the open in 2013, and the National Labour Party investigated what happened. Carrie Murphy was forced to withdraw her candidacy, and that is the second pebble in our ripple. Now, Falkirk eventually went to the SNP in the 2015 election when Labour was completely knocked out north of the border, so she might never become an MP anyway. But let's just stick to where we are for the moment. So Ed Miliband was typically highly embarrassed about this whole affair. He was dubbed Red Ed by the tabloid papers. And because he got the Labour leadership with the help of trade unions, there was this idea that they were the puppet masters, that he was manipulating his leadership into a more left-wing agitated direction. So having a union like Unite, particularly a left-wing one, attempting to stitch up a candidate selection made the problem even worse. So, in the next pebble we're going to cast, he appointed this man, Lord Ray Collins, against someone else you've never heard of. I will get to someone who you will recognise eventually. And he instigates the review into the Labour Party generally, but crucially, how it elects its leaders. So he's another veteran trade union man, and he called the abolition of the Electoral College, which had existed since the 1980s, for how Labour had chosen its leaders. And instead, he wanted a one-member, one-vote system. He also supported this new thing that allowed the registered supporters, so people in this room could pay a couple of quid and get involved in a Labour leadership election. Everyone thought, that's fine, there's not going to be a leadership election anytime soon because Ed Miliband is going to win the 2015 general election. So in 2014, before that election, Ray Collins' recommendations were fully implemented and everyone thought that's to go on. But of course we know what happened. The Conservative Party surprisingly won the 2015 general election, and Ed Miliband was out, and there was a contest. Now, should they run that contest as they were done before, or should we do Ray Collins' new system, the one member, one vote, and the registered supporters? So again, the party went for the new one, and that is the next pebble cast to where we're going. So the 2015 Labour leadership election did not really go to plan exactly. With Ed Miliband out of the picture, the remaining candidates were not that interesting, shall we say. They didn't make very good pitches to renew the party that had now lost 2 general elections. So we had to step forward someone who was a complete surprise candidate and no one expected, yep, it's Jeremy Corbyn. So he runs in this leadership contest. No one really knew where he'd come from. He'd been a Labour MP for 30 years. He'd voted against the new Labour government 500 times. He was the most rebellious MP. And in fact, Tony Blair tried to get Jeremy Corbyn deselected. And the fact was, he said, no one needs to worry about him. It's not as if he's ever going to be Labour leader, is it? So he created much excitement on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, lots of young people who were really enthused about politics thought this could be something quite different. And so what did they do? They joined the Labour Party as registered supporters. Thousands, tens of thousands of them in fact. And combined with his insurgent campaign, he became the opposition leader. Another ripple, another pebble I should say, in our ripple. So after that comes 2016 and the Brexit referendum. We're now into more current history. Now, Labour has always been the party most enthusiastic about remaining within the EU, but there had always been a strain of people who were quite Eurosceptic, very ardently so, and Jeremy Corbyn was one of those. He voted against every single EU treaty we had joined up to, and he was core to that thinking. Now, as a backbench MP, no one really cared what he had to say or think, because he was so overwhelmed by the big middle of the Labour Party that was much more pro-EU. So when it came to the 2016 referendum, everybody thought, the Labour leaders would be front and centre of the campaign to remain. Except it didn't quite work like that for Jeremy Corbyn. He did campaign for Remain, as you can see, there he is, Labour in for Britain, but he did it with, shall we say, quite minimal effort. He said he was only 7.5 out of 10 enthusiastic about the EU. He was far more concerned about other political matters. So when it came to that referendum campaign, he would not do the things another Labour leader would have done. And I remember speaking to some very senior people in that Vote Leave campaign, and they said, had it not been for Jeremy Corbyn, there would not have been Brexit. Because another Labour leader would have been much more enthusiastic behind the Remain cause and could have given it that extra pep to get it over the line. Now, the crucial thing Mr. Corbyn would not do was appear with other political parties, especially Conservative. So during the referendum campaign, where you've got David Cameron, Neil Kinnock and Paddy Ashton, all three different parties campaigning for Remain, there's no Jeremy Corbyn there. Not once did he appear with another party during that. And when those Labour voters were feeling a little bit Eurosceptic, not too sure how to vote, which way to vote, they looked at the leadership and they saw he was just as ambivalent as Jeremy Corbyn and took that moment to go whichever way they wanted. And so from that one punch, all those little pebbles cast created that ripple effect that took us to the defining moment in modern British political history. This was Brexit. And you can see on the morning there after the referendum vote, Michael Gove and Boris Johnson looking absolutely delighted with their decision to campaign for leave there. Now you can see the weight on their shoulders, the referendum cast. They could feel this huge burden that they had done, and the fact that David Cameron had resigned, the mark between 3-4, and no one had much of a plan of what Brexit was going to look like. But the fact is, Brexit was not entirely on their shoulders. Yes, they campaigned very keenly for us to leave the EU, but the fact is the referendum was shaped by so many little forces, little things that were done on the way that nobody at the time actually thought were going to amount to something quite huge. And let's just think about history a little bit differently. Let's play back some of these counterfactuals from this moment on the 23rd, 24th of June 2016. So let's say, without Jeremy Corbyn, maybe a different Labour leader would have appeared in that photograph. They would have been there campaigning Remain with the other parties, and been much more strident in that case. Without those new leadership rules introduced by Ray Collins in 2014, maybe Andy Burnham would have been won the 2015 leadership race. He would have been much more enthusiastic about Remain. I interviewed Andy Burnham for the book I wrote last year, and he said, had I led Labour, we would not have had Brexit. Maybe a little bit promoting himself there, shall we say. But of course, without that moment and without Brexit, Carrie Murphy would not have entered the picture, and she returns because she was Jeremy Corbyn's chief of staff, and so she was responsible, many people in Labour saying, there's a very good book about this called Left Out, for the 2019 campaign, which, as I'm sure you know, gave Labour its worst electoral result since 1935, and once again gave us Boris Johnson. So without her running in Falkirk, maybe Corbyn would never have become Labour leader. She certainly wouldn't have been centre to that 2019 campaign. And maybe without this whole scandal, if Ed Miliband had taken a totally different approach with all this, he could have been in 10 Downing Street with the Ed Stone. We all remember that there with his 6 pledges he was going to install in the Downing Street garden if he could get planning permission from Westminster Council. If the rules had not changed, the whole of that history could have turned out very differently. So just imagine if Eric Joyce had gone home that night, instead of headbutting Tory MPs, there would have been no vacancy in Falkirk, no leadership rule change, no Corbyn, no 7.5 enthusiasm for Remain, no Brexit, and no, crucially, Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So all those events can be traced back to one punch in Stranger's Bar. These are all imponderables, though. Like almost everything in politics, there's only so much you control. And this event proves even challenging for the best leaders. And that punch is just one of those small things. So next time you hear a politician talk about a grand strategy or their plans to control events and shape a narrative, just remember what happened in that bar in February 2012. Little events, coincidences, subtle moments, they can all produce some of the biggest ripple effects. Thank you.